Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, your weekly developer podcast. I'm in California, Frank Krueger on my crappy microphone, but it may sound amazing because I'm going to run this through Adobe Podcast, and we'll see if I sound silky smooth, Frank.
And will you just put me through some kind of noise filter or something so that I sound echoey and garbagey and we can balance out?
No. I'm going to download the tracks separately and then merge them together. There'll be no conflicts. Frank, before we get into the topic tonight, I have to ask you a question.
Ooh, I like this.
Did we buy the wrong Mac? Did we mess up?
Oh, is there something better available 6 months after we made our purchases? Of course there is, James. That's how Macs work. Did we make a mistake? Cut into the conclusion, no. But there are new Mac Studios out, and they are gorgeous. And you can spec them very, 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 very high. It turns out to match the spec computers we have to do. You only have to do like three little upgrades, but you still have to upgrade it to hit our specs. But it's a cool machine. Technically, it's an M4 Max versus a Pro. More GPUs, I guess. No, I'm still pretty happy with my purchase, but I will say I'm bitter about 3 things precisely. But I'll let you say your piece first.
Well, let's see if our bitterness interweaves or not, because it is interesting that I did an M3 Ultra and an M, because the M3 Ultra is actually their flagship. No, M3 Ultra.
Oh, I apologize. Okay, sorry, I missed that.
So it's M4 Max and an M3 Ultra, and actually the M3 Ultra is their high end of the Mac Studio. It's very confusing, very Apple-esque. I would say this, that the only thing that I'm really sad about is that our little Mac Minis can't get 512 gigs of RAM.
That's so much RAM. Gosh, my runaway processes will take minutes to crash.
Do you even need a hard drive? I say just store everything in RAM. Like, you don't need to save anything to disk.
God, what a better way to compute. I love it.
It looks great.
Would you have done the upgrade? What's the upgrade? Is that like 10 grand? What's it take?
I did look.
Let's find out. It's a $4,000 upgrade.
What's the total price? The total price.
Oh, let us not discuss total prices.
Well, so I think I tried to spec it out, and I think if we got something similar to ours, granted the CPUs are different, we were still very much more expensive.
Okay, James, I'm just gonna get your hard drive size 2 terabytes, and it comes out to a measly $9,899 US.
How much RAM?
512, babe.
Oh, okay.
Why would I go with any less?
How much for 64? Can you even get 64?
Not in the configuration I picked.
I think it's like 96 or something like that.
The very first CPU upgrade allows you to get 64, but you do have to do a CPU upgrade. And then for your 2 terabyte setup, it's $3,299. For my 4 terabyte setup, it's $3,899. So you do get more GPU cores, but it is more expensive.
Yeah, like I went back and mine was like $2,800, so it's actually like $500, on it. And yeah, it's very fascinating. I like the size of mine. The only thing that I would say is my pet peeve, and then I'll let you get into your 3, is that is $500 worth a whole bunch of extra ports, basically. That's the only question.
Oh, you're getting into my pet peeve. Pet peeve number 1, the first USB-A port. Pet peeve number 2, the second USB-A port. Pet peeve number 3, the SD card reader. I'm like, come on, Apple. You can't put an SD card reader on the Mac Mini. Come on, Apple. So I just think it's funny because I think we've done about 20 episodes about dongles at this point, and this computer just comes with USB-A ports, and I think that's hilarious. And it's a little bit of a pet peeve. I would have liked 1 or 2.
Yeah, I'm not like I would say this, like, we knew it was coming. The thing is that dang, that Mac Mini is so dang cute, and it's been rock solid.
Yeah.
That said, yeah, I mean, probably would have liked a M4 Max or whatever, you know what I mean? But I'm fairly happy with like what we actually chose at the end of the day. So
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this computer. And although I think we said we had our computers set up within like a week or two, I think it's actually taken me about 3 months to get this thing fully configured to where I'm happy to use it as my dev machine every day. And you can't put a dollar amount on that at this point. There's no way I'm trading this one. And I only want to do this upgrade cycle so many times per lifetime.
yeah, because I think here, if I look at like the M4 Max versus Pro, like yes, it's going to be different, but we did get the fully upgraded Mac at the M4 Pro. Like we got the highest tier one, right? And if you were to, for example, jump to the M3 Ultra chip, the lowest end one, then you're looking at a $4,400 jump, right? So we're almost looking at like a nearly a 2x
Yeah.
bump there. So that's when it becomes a little bit crazy, and because you can, with anything, you can like go this. So we said, okay, let's max this puppy out and go with there. So I'm fairly happy with the maxing out of the mini, and I think I'll be okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine the debates I would have had in my head if the ceiling was much higher, because I already am upset with how much money I spent. Not really, it's a great computer, but it's a lot of money. If the ceiling was higher and Apple gave me more ways to spend money, I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad we made our purchase. I'm happy. This thing's gonna rock for years and good to go.
I totally agree. Yeah, and I think it's the biggest thing would be like, yeah, the cores or whatever, like you said,
The
but I'm
GPU.
fairly happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in
Yeah.
retrospect, what I should have done is just grab the 1 terabyte and then got like a, NVMe or whatever, but I'm still happy that the 2 terabytes, I'm going to fill it up. Like, you know what I mean? I'm
You're
just going
gonna
to do that.
fill
I'm
it
going to
up.
get I'm going to get the NVMe anyways and do that. Anyways, okay. So I don't regret anything. But I am glad you're right, because if they were released at the same time, it would have took me like 10 years to figure out which one to actually
Yeah.
get. You know what I mean? So I'm glad the mini did
We
it.
would still
And
be
it,
we'd be talking about it on this podcast to this day.
yeah, totally. All right. So you've been doing some other stuff, Frank. What have you been up to besides
Ooh,
debating our decisions and purchases?
I haven't been doing any of that. I have been deving on my dev machine, James. I have
Ooh.
been coding the codes, writing the apps, more specifically, uploading the apps to Apple. So I realized I had a few ticking clocks going on at the beginning of the year here. To name a couple, Xamarin, although officially up in a farm in upstate New York years ago, is truly ending because Xcode, you can't submit apps with Xcode 15.4 anymore. So ticking clock number one, I want to make sure all my apps are up to date and ideally update them to newer SDKs so I don't have to deal with this problem in the future. Ticking clock number two, have you heard of this thing called, what is it called? The Digital Services Act, Digital Rights Act, European Digital Something Act. This happened a year or two ago, but Apple really truly started enforcing in February / Europe started enforcing in February. And I missed an email, and
Oops.
turns out I hadn't finished all my compliance documentation for it. And so sadly, some of my apps aren't for sale in Europe right now, and it's killing my soul and it's killing my bank book. So I'm trying to get it all resolved, and ticking clock, I'm a little bit concerned that they're going to make me submit apps in order. Sometimes Apple makes you do that in order to get a refreshed store information. You actually have to submit a new build. And so I needed all my apps in a buildable state. A few other little ticking clocks. I'm going on vacation. So, just little things like that. So I found myself delivering many apps to Apple, just kind of going on a blitz through all of my apps, just trying to get them all updated and uploaded. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about because I learned a lot, got better at it as more time went on. But in a nutshell, got about 5-ish apps uploaded, 6 or 7 if you're really counting. So I'm pretty proud of myself and want to talk about it.
Yeah, I want to talk about it as well. I had some people ask me recently about uploading apps and if there's other things to upload and there's like and what to store when you're thinking about uploading apps. I'll kind of get to that. I think it's like ancillary, but I know about it, but I don't know how to do it correct. So I'm interested because you're kind of like the Mac iOS expert. But it's funny because what I've been doing is building my iOS applications. I have also have ticking time bombs, which we've also talked about in a while as well. I have converted or semi-converted many of my apps to Maui. I just I haven't had to like update any of my apps, right? Like for a
Yeah,
while. Or if
they
I
were
have, they've been
perfect,
so small. They're perfect. Maybe I
bug
did some,
free.
So I recently, right before I left, there's a few ticking time bombs for me as well. One was App Center is being shut down on the
Oh, I
31st
forgot to
officially. Yep,
forgot to
don't forget
mention that
that
one.
thing. Yep.
Got to pull that from all my softwares. Yep.
Hmm. Now, luckily, there is like a way to easily export, and I did a video on it, like to Azure DevOps. I think even GitHub Actions. Basically, you can export your profile and you can give you stuff. The other ticking time bomb, of course, yeah, is once I recently did a build and I uploaded to test flight, I got a little nasty warning in Transporter because that's how I upload my apps, and it says issue, and I go, but it's a little warning issue, not an error. And it says, hey, you have until April 12th to update to Xcode 16.
April 24th.
Maybe, whatever it is, April something.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go
Whatever
with
it was,
yeah.
it was after App Center, which didn't matter because my real deadline was March 31st. And then once that happens, it also means that Google for Android will force you soon to build again some new thing as well. So it's a ticking time bomb there. And since Apple's enforcing that, that means that there's no more builds of Xamarin iOS, and then Xamarin Android apps that will support that. Now, that being said, I was recently talking to some people and they said, hey, like I'm not shipping to the App Store. I'm building internal enterprise applications. Can I still build and ship applications? Like my app's perfect, right? And I said, well, technically, yeah. I mean, you don't have support. I mean, if the code runs, the code runs.
Runs.
I said, here's your problem. The only problem is if for some reason iOS or Android come out with a new version and they do some breaking change. Now, what could that possibly be? Who knows? The only thing I can really think about is like on iOS or Android, they might remove an API that you're using, or like NewsKit. Remember, was it
Yeah.
well,
News Kit went away.
NewsKit?
Yeah.
And if you didn't link it or didn't do something, then you get a crash, right? So in that case, you'd have to rebuild. But if you are specifically in control of the devices that you're deploying on in some enterprise deployment, sure. But frankly, that's not you and me. We're shipping these puppies to the App Store, so we got to get our butts cruising and moving
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah. And I think we've been mentally preparing for it though for several years. And I've written a bunch of
Yes, accurate. Several years. Yes, that is correct. They only told us 4 years ago, Frank. It's on us.
Keep it
It's
in
on
mind when
us.
you're trying to just keep it in mind when you're trying to migrate your users, how long it actually takes to do this kind of process. I've built like .NET iOS apps and things like that and have deployed them. So I was vaguely comfortable. So what I wanted to do, number one, I just wanted to make sure I had all my apps building like in CI. So like locked down to 15.4 Xcode. So I have one more month to get my act together. But ideally migrate it to .NET. So I'm not really a Maui person. I'm using like Net 8 iOS. And for reasons I chose Net 8. It's no big deal. I'll upgrade to Net 9. That's just changing a character later on. It's no biggie. But for dev machine reasons, I went with a version of .NET 8. So I was a little nervous. You got to build your confidence with this kind of stuff. So I started with my smallest app, Spectrogram. It is a
Nice.
one UI. It just displays a scrolling spectrograph. It's a very simple app. And I wanted to get that ported over. I did my normal thing of I create a new project and look at the CS proj to see what properties I'm going to have to copy over. James, there are very few properties on a blank CS proj these days. So I'm just like, well, I guess I should just delete everything. And so go into my CS proj. I like to do things by hand because that's the way I like to break things. and just kind of hacked the CS proj, crossed my fingers, did a .NET restore, .NET build, complained about nfloat. God, and nfloat seems to move every time I try to code iOS. Nfloat's in a different namespace. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Found it, tracked it down, put it in, and the stupid app built and ran. And I was very proud of myself. I was like, oh, look at that. Actually, what if for 4 years I've put off porting my apps, and it took a whopping, we'll call it a full hour of work to get that thing converted over.
That's not bad. I mean, did you get it? Did you get it actually signed? Like, because I mean, like,
no,
is the
we're far from that step.
Oh, okay.
No.
I was gonna say, like, yeah, building it and deploying on a simulator is one thing, but then anything else, good luck.
But I would like to take a side tangent and say the state of .NET development environments on Mac is not the greatest at the moment. There's a weird state where I try to use Rider for everything. Rider supports .NET Mac apps -Mac, Mac OS, whatever, just fine. But for whatever reason, just has these iOS bugs and just can't start up iOS apps. VS Code, thanks to the C# dev extension kit thing, runs iOS apps great with the debugger and everything. Not Maui even, right? These are just net iOS apps. Runs them great. Refuses to run Mac apps.
Oh, interesting.
I'm in this awkward state where I can debug with Rider Mac apps, but I have to use VS Code to debug iOS apps. I'm hoping Rider will just get the bugs fixed, and maybe someday we can bribe a Microsoft to enable Mac. Anyway, so that actually went pretty well. I was happy to get those development environments. One other little quick side tangent. I kept noticing this little warning popping up. It's like, hot reload's not working, bae. And I'm like, what? Why not? And they're like, you have runtime 8.0.3 and hot reload requires 8.0.10. And so I'm like, oh, darn, So I had to go upgrade all my SDKs because I want that hot reload. That hot reload's important to me. And got the SDK uploaded and hot reloads are working. So that's kind of fun.
Cool.
Now, that's the hot reload for Maui's YAML views, which I don't use a lot of. And but it also makes things like .NET Watch run and things like that work. So that was fun to get those SDKs upgraded. So I spent a little time fooling around with tooling added to the time. But then came the really ugly part of, you got to get this baby signed. I want it up in CI and everything. And I have to admit, that took the rest of the day. How long have we been doing this, James? I feel like I've been doing this, let's call it 15, 16 years. I know everything there is to know about signing. That's not true at all. And yet it still took me an entire day to get this stupid app signed. I kept getting confused between code signing keys. Like in the old Xamarin days, you could just say distribution and it would go find it. But now they very specifically want you to put the team ID into like the key that you're using. So subtle things like that. It was a little bit annoying, but I was able to finally get a CI script making a build that Apple was happy with it. I use a little GitHub action to upload directly to Apple. I don't use the transporter, James. You got to up your game.
I was going to ask you what you decided to go with because I'm sort of in that state of picking and choosing. And I had a good conversation with a few people that were talking about, mobile specific. When I think of how I'm building like, .NET-y, projects or ASP.NET Core or things like that, I can go into Visual Studio, right click and say publish. And then I can say, oh, just create my, even for Azure Functions, I do it all the time. Say, just, hey, create my GitHub action script. And like, I'll point it to my Azure and I'll do all this stuff. Right. And that would be nice to have for .NET MAUI or iOS or Android applications. But
in the end, it's actually pretty close. You do, in fact, call .NET Publish. That is the right command. You just have to pass in a few things, like you want to say the release build. You want to pass in the name of your code signing key. That was the part that I was saying I got confused with because now they want the team ID included with that part. And so for the longest time, it just couldn't find my provisions. And I was pulling my hair out because the old Xamarin build would find it otherwise. What is it? There's I feel like there's one or two small more command line, but in the Maui documentation they say how to publish release builds for iOS apps, and they give basically the command line that you want to give. Funny little detail, you don't want to pass a solution to it. You want to pass a CS proj because it tries to sign and upload everything otherwise, and you don't want that. But
Mm-hmm.
in the end, it outputs an IPA file, a little compressed app, and then it's up to you to get that uploaded to Apple. But like I said, I just use a GitHub action. A part of every Xcode install is this, what's it, the AL tool or the AC tool, one of those tools that can just take any IPA and just upload it to the Apple servers if you give it the correct credentials.
I was going to ask you because the fascinating part about, getting into the GitHub Action ecosystem is that there's probably a bunch of GitHub Actions for like just like iOS things, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because once you have the IPA or once you have like an info P list or whatever, like those are just iOS things. So anyone building a Swift application, right, is going to do the same process. It's literally just the build that's different. But if you're bumping versions or you're doing things or you want to go to test flight, for example, those are just normal iOS-y things. So it has like nothing to do with .NET at that point. So I'm imagining there has to be
Yeah.
a pretty decent iOS ecosystem on GitHub Actions.
Yeah, I don't know how expansive it is, but it doesn't really need to be. I used three. One that installs a certificate. So I put a little certificate in my GitHub secrets. So that just installs it into the keychain so that it can be found later. There's another GitHub action that super cool. You give it a bundle ID and it'll automatically download the latest provisions for that
Ooh,
bundle ID. So
lovely.
now my yearly, the cycle we all have to go through, my yearly cycle is pretty easy now. I just have to recreate the certificate and then refresh the provisions, upload the stupid certificate to GitHub, and then I'm good. I don't have to do anything with the provisions as long as I refresh them on the Apple side. And so
Nice.
that GitHub action downloads the provisions. The .NET build takes care of the signing. It calls all the code signing tools and all that kind of stuff. So that's all done for you. And then the actual upload to Apple is, like I said, one more GitHub action. And that one hasn't been updated in years. So I guess the API hasn't changed. Like I said, it's really just a very lightweight wrapper over a command line call into an Xcode tool to upload the app.
Well, that's excellent. It's good to hear because I think that's going to be, I mean, all my code's on GitHub anyway. So it's going to be my next journey is like, okay, doing this. And like, are you sending it to test flight then directly, like into that thing, and then you promote it in the portal?
Yeah, exactly. So sorry. I keep going back and forth on how CD I want to get. I'm all about the CI. How continuous delivery do I like to be? I actually don't. I don't love hitting my beta testers with every dumb build that I feel like putting out every week. I don't think that's very
Mm,
nice to the beta testers and all that kind of stuff. And so what I used to do, and we've talked about on the podcast, I used to do this weird nightly trigger thing. I had like a cron job that would run and it would check if there were major changes, and then it would do a proper upload to test flight. I decided
mm.
I don't even like that one. Another way people do is they'll do tags. So every time you create a new tag, it'll do an upload. I decided I don't even like that one. You know what I like, James? The
What?
manual one. When I want to
Oh,
deploy the app, I go in and I click the button deploy the app. And you know what? I like that. I don't need to be deploying at midnight every night. No one's awake at midnight. I deploy the app when I want to deploy the app.
so how does that work? Is it all in one GitHub action? And then that step is like just manual basically. So you could go to all of your builds and say, okay, hey, this one's built. And then you can actually then click the button. It's kind of like you put a gate in basically.
Yeah, so every little sub action in what's it whatever they're called, you can put in a conditional on an if.
Hmm.
And any GitHub workflow, you can put a trigger on called workflow dispatch, which gives you a button in the GitHub UI so that you
Ooh.
can manually run that workflow. And so I have a condition that says if run by that manual by workflow dispatch, in other words, if run manually, then do the full signing build and the full upload to Apple. Because I gotta tell you, these builds aren't fast. One would say they're kind of slow, in fact, because I'm doing full AOT builds and all that kind of stuff. And GitHub upgraded to ARM processors, and some of the old stuff is in ARM, and so some of the builds take a little bit of time. Mac is making fat binaries now, so the builds take a little bit of time. So something like Calca takes 12 minutes to build.
Hmm.
Mocast takes 6 minutes to build. And so that's not great when you're just doing like PRs and you just want to try out new little things. So I only
Yeah.
do the full release signed build conditionally. And I do like a super quick debug build just to make sure things are compiling normally.
I was gonna ask exactly what your step was there, and that's exactly what I was thinking. Because yeah, right now, how I have my stuff set up is that it does a full build of my apps, and right now they're taking anywhere between 8 to 10 minutes.
Nah, terrible.
So
Your build has
that
to
and
be
that's for
under
full
2 minutes,
release.
3 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's got to be quick. All right, and then uh, in GitHub Actions, have they made it so there? Do you have to still install .NET and the workloads and everything, basically?
You do, but there's a lot of .NET's pre-installed. So if you're clever,
Ah,
you'll just pick a version of .NET that the machine already has. But honestly, .NET installs instantaneously. That's no
it's
big
real
deal.
quick. Yeah.
The workloads take a bit longer, especially when you get Android involved. But even, gosh, they have such a good network connection or whatever proxying they're doing. Even the workloads get installed within a couple minutes.
Oh,
It's
cool.
really the app build times that are the biggest. Android's a slow build because that's all AOT now. iOS is a slow build. Mac is a slow build.
Yeah. I
Uh,
like that. I like that idea basically, which is like, hey, I'm verifying. I can cut a build and release it
Whenever I
at
want.
any moment that I need, right? And then I'm going to be saving my precious minutes because I think Mac build times
Oh, it's
they're
expensive.
still
10x, 10x the pricing. Without
and you get
exaggeration, and
free.
10x slower too.
You get some free minutes, quite a bit, but so you want to savor those free moments, that
Yeah.
is for sure. Wow.
Yeah, I made the mistake of doing full builds in the past, and I used to burn through all my monies.
Frank Kruger, I'm going to give you a pro tip right now.
Okay.
Run your builds, your debug builds on a Windows PC
Oh,
or
I do.
Linux or what, or
I
just,
do.
I guess it would be on Windows, right? That would work. Yeah.
I most definitely do. So, like, I have build and test steps that don't touch the
Mm.
apps, runs on Linux. My Android builds runs on Windows. You know why? Cheaper. Period.
Yep.
Full stop. So, oh, don't worry. I have micromanaged these things because I have a lot of apps. Like my build times add up, and so I actually
Yeah.
spend a stupid amount of time refining my builds to make sure they're quick.
That makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't have thought about it until now because it's so easy to be like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to build my iOS and Android apps on a Mac. So I happen to be on a Mac or whatever, right? And
Hmm.
of course, the Android I probably would run on Windows, but even in App Center, the defaults were running everything on a Mac
Oh yeah.
already. But yeah, it's like, why? But obviously, even me, I'm on a Windows machine right now. I could boot up your iOS build. I can compile it just fine because the iOS workload installs just fine there. Which one's the cheapest one? Is Linux cheapest or is Windows cheapest?
Linux. Linux is the cheapest.
You should be able to build your Android apps on Linux because it is
Yeah, I was
supported,
thinking
by the
about
way.
trying that one. And it might want to check me on that. It might be Windows and Linux are the same price, but
Mm.
Linux used to be the cheapest for sure.
We're gonna look it up
So
right now.
it's tricky. I have an app continuous, my IDE. What do you think the build time is for that puppy?
Oh, continuous? Well, I don't know. Don't you link nothing, right? So it should be quick.
No, link everything. That thing is
Oh,
shipping
you
the
link it.
entire runtime.
Oh, then it
Oh,
must be like half
okay.
an
No, you're
hour.
right. Link nothing. I'm sorry. Link trim nothing. So in other
Trim
words,
nothing.
AOT everything is another way of saying
Oh,
that.
yes. Yeah, then it must be longer. Then I mean, it's got to be 20 to 30 minutes, I assume.
57 minutes
Ouch.
to do a full iOS build. On my beautiful Mac Mini, which is why I will never insult it, it's 2 minutes. But on
Ooh.
the toasters that GitHub uses as Macs, It takes 57 minutes.
So I have
Oh, I don't
confirmed
know
here.
why.
I've confirmed here. Linux is 1x, Windows is 2x, and Mac is 10x. That is correct. Now
10x.
these runners are a Linux 2-core, a Windows 4-core, and then there is a Mac OS 3-core or 4-core, which is a M1 or Intel. So the pricing is the same there for the 10x
It's an
on
old
it.
refrigerator they found on the road and got it to run OS 10.
I I think that there was a video on the GitHub YouTube about walking the lab. I think there's a bunch of Mac Mini M1s, I want to say, of server
It's all
racks.
M1s? Okay.
I
Yeah,
think so. I mean,
I
who
could probably
knows?
do a CPU ID and find out, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's
I'm sure
also
like
virtualized.
there's
Who knows?
yeah, I'm sure there's a mix of different things now because I do see that there's like an option for a
Oh,
Mac OS 6-core M1 or something.
there most definitely is a mix because I have one app that'll take 12 minutes to build or 8, depending on which computer adopted it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's fun.
That makes sense. Wow.
Oh, and I
Cool.
did want to say, since we did a whole episode on small apps, I want to say that my small app Spectrogram came in at a whopping 8 megabytes. So that's still kind of
Ooh,
fun. The apps can still be very small. And that's on .NET 8, AOT'd, everything, all the modern stuff. And it's
that's
still just
cool.
8 megabytes, boots up instantly. Can't even tell.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited because I do think I'll probably get some performance boost by moving over and getting everything all super native AOT and trimmed up and things like that. I'll be interested to see like my app size. That's the nice thing now. You can actually see the difference. So did it go up in size or did it go down in size? Like, or did it stay the same?
Uh, I would say went up in size just a little bit, but I think that's
Nah.
just, modern libraries, things tend to get a little bit bigger over time, more generics. Generics tend to take up more space and stuff like that.
I'm gonna look up your account here, Kruger Systems. We got. Is it still on here? There it is. Live Spectre. Is it already up? Is it updated? Right now, it's 13.5 megs. Is what it says.
Oh, well, the jeepers. Am I lying? I thought it was just 8 megabytes, but maybe it's
Well,
13.5. I'm sorry.
Well, it's hard to say based on size on disk versus
Yeah.
size uploaded to Apple. Those are different sizes, by the way, because of how the IPA gets extracted. So it's not actually the same.
Pretty sure the binary was just 8 megabytes because I was pretty careful
Okay.
about checking all my file sizes. I think that's what I was very paranoid about when I was first doing all this work, was making project file mistakes and accidentally including too much stuff, because honestly, I just wasn't sure what all the defaults were in the new project files and that kind of stuff. Speaking of which, can I give a pro tip?
Pro tip. I'm ready.
Pretty darned important. So if you do .NET New iOS project, it's going to give you a CS proj, very few properties in it. Everything's going to work great. But every time you run your app, it's going to AOT your app. And it's going to take a little bit forever, depending on how many Mac Minis you've bought in the last year.
Yeah.
Small apps are fine. Big apps, you start to feel it. You're like, certainly this can't be right, because we never bothered to AOT whenever you were running like Simulator for sure, or we would do other like the fast AOT versions when you were deploying to a device. I'm like, certainly that still has to be supported and all that. And then there was another clue I received in VS Code. Hot Reload was like, hey, bae, still not working. I'm like, what's wrong now, Hot Reload? Why aren't you working? And it says, I need the interpreter. Well, that's not actually what it says. It says, I can't AOT these two assemblies. It's one of the worst error messages I've ever seen. But if you Google the error message, you get a GitHub issue with Rolf. Ding. Hi, Rolf. Rolf kindly explains that sadly it's kind of just an error that you have to work around. I don't know. I feel a little bit bad because it's just this nasty error. But you can GitHub it, and the trick is you turn on Use Interpreter, this old fancy feature that never used to be around, but now it's kind of a critical piece. And the reason no one really knows about this, the reason you have to dig around into a GitHub issue to find out about it is if you do a Maui project, it's on by default for debug
Yeah, I
builds.
thought they used in the original templates back in the day. They had it in the
Yeah,
template,
okay.
and then I think that they
Just
updated
became
the
a default.
template in .NET 7. I'm pretty sure, or maybe even before the release became a default, and they said, "Oh, let's flip it on." So they should maybe flip that on for iOS
So
then, or
it's
Mac too.
the weird thing. No, it's only a default for Maui projects. When you turn on like, what is it? Use Maui True or whatever that is.
Yeah.
That's the only time it kicks in. If you just do an iOS or a Mac project, it's going to AOT that puppy every time. And
Mm,
so, pro tip, create a debug property group and say use interpreter true in there, and you'll get fast builds and hot
nice.
reload will finally work
Yeah.
and it'll finally be happy.
Well, I think
So,
those
pro
project
tip, use
templates.
interpreter.
I think those project templates are open source on GitHub. You could just pull request the project templates.
Yeah, I almost want them to change the build system, but maybe it's too late for I wish it was the default also, because like a debug build, I mean, all bets are off, in my opinion, in a
Yeah.
debug build. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why they did that. That's a good question. I bet you could. I would probably, like change the default template because if that's what the Maui one is, that would make some sense. That's
I
pretty
think they
cool
just don't
though
want
that
an
you found
ugly
it.
template with conditional property groups. No
Yeah,
one likes
no,
those.
it's true. It's true. Like, and there's honestly like there's all the templates now are super trim, right? The whole idea is like that the
Yeah.
defaults are supposed to be like the way. This is the way. And I was even diving through my CS Proj for my Xamarin Forms apps, and yeah, they're like gnarly because I had this issue, which was um I was doing some final builds maybe like 4 or 5 months ago, and I was adding some new features to the snow app and the skiing app, and I was still building an app center on Xcode 15, and by default, the old templates used to build for like ARM 32 and ARM 64, I
Oh,
think.
jeez. Did they?
And
Yeah.
it would fail the CI build
Yeah.
because it got removed. And then I found some random thread that was like, oh, just update the release or whatever, right? To do this. And it's because like those things, like they're nasty. They get nasty, your CS proj over time. So, because the defaults used to be everything was in there, so many things you need to
Yeah.
set instead of just being like, here's the right ones by default. So yeah, they probably want the right ones to be on by default, which is funny. But I would argue that the interpreter should just be on by default for debug builds. That's for sure. Yeah, I agree with
Um,
you.
yeah, in the end, though, I was pretty happy because I was super paranoid about everything you just described, because like you said, everything used to be so explicit in the project files,
Yeah,
and I just don't know what the defaults are anymore.
yeah,
So I just kind of had to throw caution to wind and check the apps and see what comes out. And fortunately, basically that use interpreter is my only big override. You have to set supported platform OS version like way too many places, but
yeah.
that's fine. So that puppy's everywhere. But everything otherwise, James, I was able to do spectrogram. Then what did I do after that? I think maybe I jumped straight to Mocast, got the Mocast going. Was very happy to
Nice.
get that uploaded because it actually had some proper bug fixes and things like that. So got Mocast, then Calca Mac, then Calca
Ooh,
iOS, which are two separate apps, two whole different build scripts, two whole code bases. So that was a lot of work getting those up. Then the big puppy continuous got
wow.
continuous building. That was the tough one because for the longest time I just couldn't get Apple to accept a build of it. And this is after like a 57-minute action, right? So like
Yeah,
57 minutes go by and then the upload fails. And you're just like, no,
too big.
why? Nah. Have you seen a React app these days?
It's true.
even a
Um,
.NET, even a .NET app compiling and containing all of .NET, the entire runtime is smaller than a React app, so it's fine.
that's true. Yeah, yeah.
um, no, it was worse than that. The Apple servers were down.
Oh no! Oops.
it was just one of those things, like after so many action failures and everything, I'm just like, well, what did I do this time? It's my Xcode version, it's the Mac version, it's some mysterious. No, the servers were broken. Oh, I was
That's
pulling my
funny.
hair out.
Oh, geez. Hey, transporter, man, transporter.
No, it was everything. It was Xcode Cloud, because Apple does have server status pages, but the status was about a half hour. It took them a half hour to update it and to acknowledge that there
Oh,
was a problem. I just happened to
oops.
hit it at the wrong moment, just really to make life joyful.
That's funny. Wow. Well, I'm glad you got all.
So,
That's crazy. What I'd be interested in is maybe a blog about this awesome script, so I can steal said script.
oh yeah, I should actually just post it like, hey, here's, because in the end, that's what I ended up doing with all my apps, right? Yeah, you just copy that, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste,
Yeah, because
change the
there
name.
is there is a bunch of documentation on how to do it, but then
Sure.
it's just like here's the default, right?
Here's
But
a
it's like,
very
oh,
simple, does the
yeah,
bare
where's the end to
minimum.
end? I want the end to
Yeah.
end Frank Krueger one. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll be happy to post that.
cool.
It's actually quite easy. My only recommendation, and I wish I had told myself this 10 years ago, I wish I had created a GitHub organization that all my apps are under. And I think
Yeah,
I might still go through the effort to do it for the sole feature of organization shared secrets. Because the way I have to do it right now, every repo, I have to go through and update any of my credentials if anything ever changes. And it's
that's a good point.
tedious. But if I put everything under an org, you can do org secrets, and then Bob's your uncle. So, pro tip to anyone out there, be smarter than me, use orgs.
Interesting.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
think of it,
pro
then
tip.
then
Yeah.
we'll only have to put our certificates in one place, because the rest of my build
Mm.
scripts download the profiles automatically. It just needs that cert.
That makes sense. Yeah, because when I was doing it in Azure DevOps, basically you are an org, so you can create shared things in Azure DevOps. But yeah,
Right.
I didn't realize that for individuals that didn't work and it only worked for orgs. Fascinating. Huh.
Or if you're listening and you know a way for personal accounts to do shared secrets, please let me know. But I think, as far as my research told me, got to create an org.
Well, cool. Frank, I am very proud of you because I know that we've been
Thanks.
talking about it off camera several times. And Frank, I promise by April 24th, it's going to happen, Frank. I'm going to
You swear.
I swear it's going to happen. Well,
Apple's going to make you.
the thing I'm doing now is I'm ripping all my in-app billing stuff out because just everything is going away. The other thing that I'm very unsure about, I'm actually going to deprecate my in-app billing plugin. No one knows about this yet unless you're listening. Only because StoreKit is deprecated and StoreKit 2 is a Swift only API and I don't know how to
Well,
use it yet.
if you want to, we could create a library for you so that we can continue it. But that's up to you, buddy. I will write you a little Swift libraries that'll be C# compatible.
Okay. All right.
If you want.
If you do, we'll have to. It'll have to be a whole. Okay, all right. Okay. Well, yeah. You published a NuGet of just the Swift binding,
Mm-hmm.
and then I will
Yeah,
consume.
you can just code against it.
Okay. Maybe we'll create a new
It's
org
doable.
that's called in-app billing .net in-app billing.
Forever billing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week's Merge Conflict. Let us know if you bought a Mac Mini, if you regret all of your life decisions, and if you've gone through the cycle, you know any pro tips. I learned a lot actually, Frank, from going through this with you and all of the effort and energy. So thanks for all of this. I'm excited to progress forward and actually like do things, and it's going to happen. So I'm excited about it. So well, thank you for going through the effort and energy, and congrats on all the app releases, Frank.
Thank you, and not one rejection. Knock on wood.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's Merge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Krueger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.